Hello, guys. What's up? Welcome to the channel. And today on the channel, we got a very special guest. So today we have Blake Herrick, right? Did I say it right? And he is currently on a raw vegan lifestyle, right? So I wanted to ask you as well, for how long have you been on this lifestyle?
Yes. Hello, Yasi. Thank you so much for having me on your channel. I love your channel. I love the work that you do. I've currently only been on the raw food lifestyle since the beginning of this year, so not too long. But after I had a weight loss experience in high school, I kept that weight off for about 23 years. So I've been eating a whole food diet, pretty healthy, for that amount of time. And it just led me to this lifestyle. And I'm so happy to have come into the knowledge of the power of raw foods, especially fruit. And it's just given me another transformation later in life, almost as powerful, if not more powerful, than the transformation I had in high school when I lost 100 pounds.
All right. So I wanted to ask you, what actually led you to this choice, to like finding out about the raw vegan lifestyle? Was it, I know a lot of people go because of health benefits or weight loss, but I just wanted to ask you, why did you find like is luring on this lifestyle that you wanted? You said like you have to try it.
Yes, that's a really good question. And thank you for asking that. And I often contemplate that myself. Like, how did I manifest this into my life? Because this has been such a blessing. And I do feel like that there was something inside me that was drawing me towards this lifestyle, whether it was my higher self or my soul was just guiding me towards this lifestyle throughout my whole life. And there were a couple things that led me into it. And so I'll give you kind of like a taste of these two different things. And there's probably even more that I haven't thought of yet. But the first thing that led me into this lifestyle is I was coming out of my personal training career and my yoga teaching career. And I decided to take a break from that and get back into the corporate world and work remotely so I could collect myself after years of running around, teaching classes, teaching students, having so many clients, and not really feel like I had a moment to collect my thoughts and breathe and discover who I really was. And also during that time, I was heavily reliant on stimulants. And I was just really, coffee. And so what I decided to do to break that addiction, that strong addiction to coffee and stimulants, was to do a fast. And this was in 2023, in the summer of 2023. And it wasn't like a true water fast because I didn't really know how to do that at that time. I didn't really even know that was a thing. I just kind of was feeling called to do a fast. And so what I did is I would wake up, I would have, my water, I would put some flavored BCAAs in with the water, squeeze some lemon. I was taking some herbs, having some herbal teas, and that led me through the fast. And I ended up going longer than I expected. I ended up going 4.5 days, which at the end of that, I felt amazing. I felt euphoric. I felt like my body was cleaning out a lot of the toxins from those stimulants that I had been taking. I remember sitting in the sauna at the gym on the fourth day, and I think as I was detoxing the stimulants out of my body, that I kind of got a buzz from them again because I was sitting in the sauna. I was like, "Woo! Oh my gosh!" It felt great, but it felt like, wow, that's kind of like an extreme coffee buzz. And then towards the end of that fast, I actually had a movement, an elimination, if you will. And what came out of my body was just utterly disgusting. It was black sludge, very strong smelling. And after not having eaten in 4 days, I knew that that was nothing that I had eaten recently. And so that started to open the window in my mind of the possibilities of how clean I can get my body through fasting and how dirty my body had been. It allowed me to connect the dots that that stuff inside me that came out was a direct result of what I had been eating and what I had been putting in my body. And so that was kind of the beginning. And after that, I did a 3.5 day fast. I did a couple 2.5 day fasts, well, several 2.5 day fasts for the next like year and a half. Um, and throughout that time, I also started moving more towards vegetarianism. And so, that was part of it as well. Eliminating I was already not eating red meat. So I was just eating like fish and chicken and eggs, and I started to get rid of the chicken, get rid of the fish, and just have eggs and rice. That was like the main cooked food that I would eat, and then I would make a salad bowl with the eggs and the rice. And then whatever flavors I wanted to do. If I wanted to do soy sauce and have an Asian flavor, if I wanted to do some hot sauce and have like a Mexican flavor. And I mean, these bowls were delicious. It's a perfect transition food for somebody who's coming into the raw food lifestyle. Now, on the other side of what drew me into this realm of raw foods and fruits is that as a personal trainer and yoga instructor, I loved helping people. I've had thousands of students and clients. And throughout that time, my approach to training them was to teach them how to manage their health and fitness on their own so that they weren't reliant on me. I saw other personal trainers at some of the gyms and some of the studios that I worked at where they have these lifelong clients, and not that there's anything wrong with that. It's always fun to have a workout buddy, and sometimes, you would pay a personal trainer to be that person for you. But my approach was that I told my clients, I want you to fire me in like 2 months. I want to work myself out of a job, and I want to see a total transformation out of you so that you can just go off and flourish and soar and continue to make results. And just a quick story on that. Just a few months ago, I was doing a run on the beach here in St. Petersburg, Florida, and I see somebody who looks very familiar, and I run past them. I'm like, no way. Is that Sunny? And so I turn around
So
and
Sunny
I come up.
was one of your trainees or just
Exactly. He was one of my trainees, and I hadn't seen him in a couple years since I left the personal training jobs. And I was like, Sonny, what's going on? He had lost like another 60 or 70 pounds, even after I was done training him. And and I was like, how did you do this? You look amazing. Oh my gosh. He was like, I was just doing exactly what you told me to do. Just eat less, eat clean, keep doing my walks on the beach, and keep doing my pickleball league. It's that simple, you know? It's just being mindful of living a healthy lifestyle. But even though I love personal training and I love coaching, being a yoga instructor, like I said earlier, there was something inside me driving me towards more, because my goal was that I wanted to be able to monetize my personal training business and my passion for health and wellness online and be an online coach so that I could live more like the digital nomad lifestyle. I haven't traveled a lot in my life, and I have these dreams and aspirations that of traveling and seeing the world and being free to work from my laptop, coach people, help people, make the content while being in Costa Rica or India or Australia or Thailand. I don't even know. And see these beautiful places. And I just knew that the fitness side of things and the yoga side of things wasn't my true calling somehow. And I think that that was the soul guidance coming through again. And when I came into this world of raw foods and I started to study some of the natural hygiene writers like Arnold Ehret, Herbert Shelton, Hilton Hotima, and read their writing, I had this realization that this is the information that I had been teaching my personal training clients. It's just an overall holistic wellness system of getting fresh air, getting sunlight, drinking clean water, eating clean foods, plant-based, getting exercise, having a good social circle, conducting yourself with emotional poise, and then practicing fasting. And just a quick aside, That entire time after my weight loss experience in high school for 20 years, I had been practicing intermittent fasting, where I wouldn't eat until lunchtime, basically. And so it wasn't until after a few months in, and actually very recently into my raw food lifestyle, that, I decided that, you know, yes, I'm passionate about coaching people on the power of raw foods and fruits. But really, what was the most pivotal moment for me in my life was the weight loss experience. And I used intermittent fasting to help with that. And then my transition into being raw. And I used fasting as a method to transition into the raw food. So that's now what I'm helping people do. I finally found my true calling and what I want to help people and coach people on, which is the different styles of fasting, whether it's intermittent fasting, juice fasting, water fasting, dry fasting. I've done them all and had great results. On the other side of a fast, you're never going to be the same as you were on before the fast. It's going to completely change and permanently change your relationship to food and your eating habits moving forward. So yeah, that's where I'm at now, Yasi.
Right. So if we're going to, okay, just because you mentioned it quite a lot, like for me, I noticed that as I mentioned also in one of my videos that when we do like too much fasting and we don't refeed and we're too focused on only fasting. So I think that in the beginning of the way, it could be like good, but we also need to realize that in order to stay on this lifestyle, maybe I'm just asking for your opinion. Do you feel like sometimes you like have more cravings when you do those things, but it can be like on other days. It doesn't have to be like on the same day, right? So a lot of people say that it's because something is leaving your body, but for me, I've been craving like something I didn't eat for 18, 19 years just because I was like really hungry and it's like what I smelled, what was in my environment. I didn't eat it. I didn't really want to eat it, but I'm just asking for about your experiment or your experience with the fasting and cravings.
Yeah, absolutely. All of that is true. And I honor those cravings. And if I had some delicious smelling schnitzel at my place, I'm not sure that I would have the same willpower as you. I would probably just, take that breaded meat and just, have a piece of it. No, I'm just kidding. But what fasting has helped me to discover when it comes to food and really sit with that, when you're in a fast and you're not taking the food into your body and you have a craving come up and you're like, well, I'm not going to break my fast. Let me just sit with that and let me just see how that feels, and examine the reason why I'm having that craving. For me, I had some cravings for like warm soup, and then I had some cravings for salad. So let's compare and contrast those two cravings that I had. The cravings for soup I discovered were a comfort feeling from missing my family or from wanting to remember nostalgic moments with my parents and with my sisters. And so what I started to learn along my journey is that somebody's cravings can be mostly emotional or mental based, and they can be deeply tied into your feeling of comfort and safety. If you think about it, the first experience with food that we typically have is right when we're born and our mom starts feeding us. So we correlate food with warmth and safety from the very time that we're born. So whether or not when my body needed that soup physically, probably not. Probably it was just because I was feeling lonely or feeling like I was missing my family. And so I felt somehow subconsciously that having some soup would bring me closer to that feeling of warmth and comfort of being around my family. So one's relationship to food is definitely going to be put on the spotlight as you're fasting. And that's what I discovered, is that it's so intertwined with somebody's emotions that it helped me to not be as judgmental on myself or judgmental on other people if they're not eating perfectly or eating exactly the same way that I think is perfect to eat. I think a lot of people in especially our industry or our niche of the raw foods, they say, you have to eat this way. You have to eat that way. My
Yeah.
way is better than your way. No, more fruits is better. No, more vegetables is better. No, you can never have cooked foods. Actually, no, you can have some mucusless steamed foods.
Yeah.
And no nuts and seeds. Yes, nuts and seeds. And it's just like, my God. And so I decided to start to divorce myself from that dogma and just, you know what? If I wanted to have that steamed soup and that just gave me the same type of feeling as like a warm hug from my mother, and that brought me closer to that feeling of family, then who's to say that that's a wrong thing to do, you know?
Kilomucus.
And it's still mucusless. Exactly, exactly. But, you know, what if that was like an animal product or something like that? That's where we start to get into the gray area. And we
Yeah.
can talk more about that too. Now, on the other side, to compare and contrast, I was also craving some salads. And I know you and I talked about this before. When I was craving salads, that was actually my body talking to me that, hey, you need some vitamins and minerals and you need some stuff in your body that only salads can give you. And, you know, this was actually happening, especially when I was doing a fruit juice fast. You know, all my juices that I was doing were comprised of fruit. I wasn't having any green juices. This was
Yes,
coming off of my this was coming off of my dry fast, and I just wanted to keep my body in that high vibrational cleansing state because after my dry fast, I felt like my body was still detoxing some stuff, and I can actually tell that it still is. It kind of dislodged some stuff and broke some stuff free. It's still kind of working its way out because trust me, even though I was eating mostly clean and keeping my calories, you know, pretty low and pretty whole food based throughout that 20-year weight loss, I would have my cheat days where I would, you know, indulge and overeat and, you know, alcohol and caffeine and cannabis sprinkled throughout that stuff. So I think that that stuff sometimes can get lodged in your tissues and it's just a process of detoxing it out. So I wanted to keep that going. I was just subsisting off of the fruit juices after that dry fast and my body started to crave like a salad. I started to have like these visions and these like cravings like, man, a salad would be great. Oh my gosh, you know, this would be wonderful. And I didn't make a salad right away. I slowly worked my way into it and I was like, well, what I can do is I can make a green juice. That, you know, I love green juice and when I've done my previous juice fasts, I would make these big amazing green juices and those were kind of like my protein shakes after a workout because green juices are just loaded with protein, loaded with minerals. And when I say protein, I mean amino acids, not proteins. So, I make a green juice, I start drinking it and I didn't like it. My taste buds did not like the taste of it. And this green juice before, if you were to ask me a couple months ago on one of my juice fasts, I'd be like, oh my gosh, that's the best thing ever. Like it gets me high drinking it. I feel amazing. And I'm not denying that that's true, but just at that point, at that stage of my life, I wasn't really feeling it. I tasted it and I was just kind of like, I don't really want that. I'd rather go have my orange juice or my apple juice again. But it's not that my body wasn't still wanting some of that substance from the green foods. You know, I was still having those salad cravings. And so I was like, okay, I put too much leafy greens in my green juice. You know, let me just keep it to just like celery, cucumber, carrot, and just make it super easy. Put some lemon in there. I had it. It was better, but it still honestly wasn't my favorite. And I was like, what is going on here? Why am I craving salads? And then I do the green juices, and that's not satisfying this craving. So eventually I come out of this little, you know, post dry fast, juice fast cleanse that I was doing with just primarily fruit. And I start making my first simple salads. And they were mostly tomatoes, cucumbers, some sweet peppers with some sprouts in there, and just a little bit of lettuce and cilantro and parsley. I mean, it was the first one that I had. I remember eating it. I started eating it and I just couldn't stop myself. I started eating it without even putting the dressing on it, and it was just plain, and I was like, "This is divine. This is amazing."
Yeah.
And so what was it, Yasi? What was that craving? I strongly think that my body needed some fiber, actually.
Yeah.
I think
I
I think
and I think they're also like think in my opinion could have been just like a lot of the water content because in juice I noticed that when I also used to drink juices. Nowadays I don't really, because I noticed that I chug 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 and it's like I don't feel satisfied when I drink it and I don't feel as good as like when I eat a fruit, right? So I can eat the same amount of fruit, drink the same amount of juice, but I will feel way better when I eat the fruit. So I think that your body just starts to realize that it prefers like the whole form of the food that you're consuming, right? It goes in stages because before I also did the juice cleanse, right? But yeah, there's something different. Like the body just recognizes that it feels better. It comes with time, obviously, but could have been that it really needed the fiber, and it could be that it needed the salt minerals, and it could just absorb the water better from the salad than it could from the juice. It can be like many things.
exactly.
Yeah. Also, I wanted to ask you, so because you've been a person, you're I don't know, do you still train or like not anymore? Like train
I don't have any clients right now, no.
no, okay, okay. So, and your past life when you did train, right? So, obviously, in order to teach classes and in order to train other people, you also need to be like very, very active. I know when I used to teach, I used to do like a lot of practices in my house. I think like 3, 4 hours, maybe a day. And do you feel like when it was also before you went raw, right? Yeah. So, how did you feel like back then is it when it comes to like your diet and yeah and like your energy levels because you do need a lot of energy if we talk about like the physical energy that you need and it's also um how how was your life back then in comparison to how you see them like right now and how was it like with the food and the diet? Did you find it that you needed to have something a bit more dense, uh, as in like your food choices?
Yes, absolutely. That's a great question as well. Now, I was still on my intermittent fasting during those times, and that's just been a lifelong practice of mine since high school. And during the beginning part of the day, sometimes my clients, I would have to wake up at 3:45 so I could be training my client at 5 a.m. And then I would have clients until early in the afternoon, and then I would eat for the first time. And then I might have some evening clients in evening classes, and then I would have another meal after that. So I'll kind of like walk you through like how my day would be structured, and you'll see that it probably wasn't the healthiest thing, even though I was extremely fit. So I think that was a good lesson for me is that fitness and health is not the same thing. If you see somebody who's like really physically fit, of course, they're going to be healthier than average, but depending on how they run their lifestyle and how they eat and how much stimulants that they're on, they could start to be causing some damage internally that's going to come to fruition later on. And that's what happened to me, and that's what I've seen happen to so many people, especially people on the carnivore diet. They might have some great results in the beginning and feel amazing, but then the health problems start tacking on. So for me,
Sorry, but were you on a carnivore diet?
no, no.
No.
I just wanted to throw that in there because I've seen people who they have results and they're very fit and they feel great in the beginning, but as
Yeah.
they keep going, the damage starts adding up from the inside out, and then it starts to have a snowball effect. So for me, what I would do is I would wake up in the morning, I would have a bunch of coffee, and I would have grapefruit.
Mm.
And So just to give some context, I practice intermittent fasting, but even though I would have a couple fruits throughout the day, I don't think that significantly broke my fast. And so what I call it is modified intermittent fasting. So that's just what I call it. If people are going to argue with me on that and say that it's not intermittent fasting, it is what it is, but that's what I call it, is modified intermittent fasting. So I'd wake up, have coffee, have a grapefruit, go train and go do all this exercise and be drinking water throughout that process. I would always carry apples around with me as little snacks in between workouts, have a couple bites of an apple, put a half an apple back in my backpack and get all dirty. Then I would just eat it again after the next class, and who cares? And then I would come home and I would typically do online homework. I was completing my bachelor's degree online and, do my homework throughout the day. And then I would go teach more classes, have more clients in the evening. Um, and sometimes I wouldn't eat until at the very end of the day after all of that. And I would have a huge meal of like rice or potatoes with chicken and steamed vegetables and just eat a bunch of food. And then I would like shower, kind of chill, relax for the evening. And then I would have more food. I would make like an oatmeal bowl with like fruit and bananas, um, and protein powder. And then I might even make some air popped popcorn and do all of that at the end of the day, and then go to bed, sleep for like 6 hours and wake up at 3:45 and do it again. So like not eating throughout the entire day except for some fruits throughout. Huge meal at night, or a couple huge meals. Go to bed right after I get done eating, probably because I'm in like a food coma from eating too much. And then wake up the next day, start slamming coffee, and then do it again and again and again and again. So even though during that time I was extremely physically fit, extremely, gifted athlete when it comes to like cardio and, I was shredded, all that stuff. But was I really healthy? Maybe for a little while, but I think those practices that I was doing started to add up. And that started to lead me to want to take a break from that sort of lifestyle of the crazy personal training running around. Not that everybody's personal training career is like mine. That's just how I was doing it. And I was probably overdoing it, plus doing school at the same time. So what ended up happening is, when I got my online job and, finished my college degree, got my online job and stopped doing all the fitness stuff and just let my body relax, I realized that it was very easy for me to gain weight because I had adjusted my body to such a high level of fitness that my body was used to it. And so it took a while for my metabolism to slow down and adjust to more of a normal pace of life. And I still would be working out, just not as much. I got back into doing yoga, like more so than all these hit workouts and, crazy workouts that I was doing. And that's what led me to feel like I wanted to start tapering down on my stimulant consumption as well. That led me into the fast I told you about that I did. And then, the rest is history from there. And now, with the raw foods, plant-based, in addition with fasting, spread out, responsibly, not overdoing it, not being one of these fasting fanatics and, getting super skinny and becoming addicted to it and having it cause like, an eating disorder type of thing. There's definitely a dark side to the fasting as well. But, doing cleanses has allowed me to basically, I look the same for the most part and have the same weight and the same performance as I did in my personal training career, like over 3 years ago, with probably like a quarter or 10% of the effort that I was doing. My adrenal glands have healed up. I'm off the coffee. I'm sleeping better. I have so much more time to read books, to build up my business and my podcast. And also there's a more spiritual component to that as well, getting to know yourself from the inside out, having clarity of thought. having willpower and drive to build my online business and realize my dream of coaching people online and being a digital entrepreneur, a digital nomad.
Yeah, I think that's a lot of people's dream. Like you can just be anywhere and still like help people. So I wanted to ask you also like about your so when you were before you went on the raw vegan like lifestyle, um you did like work out quite a lot, and I wanted to ask you about your protein consumption. Do you feel like How do you feel like now that you're on a raw vegan lifestyle, obviously you don't really consume much protein, right? Like I know I used to be needing like 76 grams of protein, which is a lot. But today when I eat like around my maintenance calories, I would say it goes up to 40 plus minus, like from fruits and vegetables and some nuts and seeds. And I wanted to ask you, like, how does it feel going from probably a high protein diet, right? Because we all are being told that we need like a lot of protein to get fit, to get lean. And here you say like you still have the same physique, right? Or yeah, so you still have the same physique and like you didn't lose any muscle. And also like I don't think that I lost any of it. I'm kind of just like wondering um how how do you feel about the protein myth like now versus what you used to think about before? Like, were you like obsessed with protein? Yeah, this is basically what I want to know.
This is the question that you probably get all the time. I get this question all the time. You know, where do you get your protein? When you tell people that you're a raw foodist, they're like, "What? What does that even mean?" It's like they don't even compute. You know, or w- I was I wouldn't say I was obsessed with protein. Maybe a little bit. I loved making protein shakes. I called them Blake shakes, and they were so delicious. And I would always make my chicken and put it in the oven. And I love to like put my chicken on a tray with like potatoes and then like green beans or something like that, and then go to the gym. And then by the time I come back from the gym, the food's done and I can just wolf down all this food. If I was, driving around or exploring or whatever, and I needed to stop at the gas station, my snack would be beef jerky. Um, I know, right? I know. And if people were vegan or, I didn't even really know about there was raw vegans. I knew there was fruitarians, and I
You
just thought
did?
that I knew there was fruitarians because I saw some guy was like being interviewed, and he opened his fridge and it was just full of fruit. And my first thought was like, this guy's insane.
Where's the
Here
protein?
I am, a fruitarian basically. And with vegans, I would just had that stereotype, Yasi. I have to come clean. You can ask me anything and I will be given honest answer on the internet. I'm an open book. I think there's too many people who lie and are total fakers on the internet. And I can tell you that I was biased against veganism. I thought that we needed to have animal products to get enough protein, and that we were designed to eat animal products, that we needed to eat meat and eggs and dairy, in order to be strong, in order to be healthy. And I thought that all vegans were like, weak, or they were crybabies for the animals and all this stuff. And I thought that the vegan bodybuilder guys were just on steroids, which probably a lot of them are. But I had some strong biases. And remember, I told you that I wanted to clean up my life after years of kind of destroying my body as a personal trainer.
Mm.
And I did that fast. And then I did a couple more fasts. I think what ended up happening is that started to free my heart and free my mind of some of that judgmental thinking. And that's what started to open me up to the possibilities of veganism, of raw foods. And just opening it up as a possibility was how it was able to come into my field as a manifestation. Whereas before, I was blocking it completely by harboring those feelings, right? And so, what I've discovered now, after, I guess, 10 and a half months of being on the raw foods, mostly fruitarian, doing a lot of juice cleanses, water fasting, dry fasting. When it comes to protein, I want to just accept the fact that it's a myth. I understand that. We were talking about when a child is born, you know, they're being fed by their mother,
Yeah.
and mother's milk is like what, like 3% protein, 3% fat, and just like, 90 plus percent carbohydrates and water. And so that's the perfect food. That's when our body's expanding the most, is just on that, macronutrient ratio. So I've dabbled, I've tried along my journey to go super low protein and super low fat, and I can make it work. And what I can tell you ends up happening is the strength takes a hit. You're not quite as strong. And this is just for me right now. And I'll sum this up at the end and share with you my beliefs on it. But
When you go low on fat and protein,
when
so
I
you
go
feel
low on fat and protein,
like you have less strength.
less
Okay.
strength, less explosive power. And
Mhm.
here's the most important thing: I have less of a desire to go and lift. And I think that's because subconsciously I know that I'm not feeding myself something that's going to help myself repair.
Okay.
And so, yeah. So, what I started to do miraculously, I always wanted to get into sprouting. And I had this friend. I was like, "Yeah, I was maybe gonna do sprouting." And they're like, "Why don't you?" I'm like, "I don't know. I'm not sure if it'll grow in my kitchen. There's no window in there and whatever. And I see some beautiful plants behind you and stuff. And I'm just,
Yeah, bro,
I'm not
but this is all fruit. It's all fruits.
wonderful,
Yeah.
beautiful." And I thought that I don't have a green thumb, and my friend was like, "No, that's silly. Just it's literally like this. You soak them overnight, and then you let them sit, after that, and then just rinse them every day, and they start sprouting." And then ever since then, I've been including sprouts in my salads. The very first day that I ate the sprout in my salad, I woke up the next day feeling full of testosterone, feeling full of vigor. Like I wanted to go to the gym. I wanted to lift heavy, and I did. And ever since then, I've been feeling amazing. I weighed 175 pounds today. After my dry fast, I was 163. And I have all the data on my phone, because when I weigh myself on my scale, it saves the data on the app. And I've gained, of that 12 pounds, 10 pounds of it is just muscle coming back onto my body. And so it's really remarkable that, you know, if you feed yourself amino acids
Yeah.
and not necessarily proteins, the body can process that. It can put on muscle. You get your power back. You get that. I think it's a hormonal thing as well. You just feel that drive to to want to work out.
Yeah.
And
That's true.
here's what I think happens, and here's my belief. And just to sum this all up is that, there's a difference between proteins and amino acids. And without getting into the whole science behind it, a protein is just a bunch of amino acids put together. A protein is what you're going to find in animal products. It's also what you're going to find in grains and legumes. But in vegetables and in fruits, there are amino acids. In order for our body to process proteins, we need to use digestive enzymes to break apart the proteins into what? Into amino acids. So there's a huge tax on our digestion just to use protein. Whereas when we get our quote unquote protein, AKA amino acids, from fruits and vegetables, we don't have to go through that digestive process to break it apart. It's already in its usable form.
Yeah.
And so that's part of it. The other part of it is that when you talked earlier, you said something really wise and really smart. You said that this evolution, when you come into the raw lifestyle, it happens kind of in phases, and you got to listen to your body. I felt that same way that you felt about juicing. That it's you kind of feel better eating the whole fruit. I started to feel that same way, but in the beginning, the juices were just so great and so hydrating, and it was giving my body a rest on digestion. So there's a tool to use at different stages in the game. And where I'm going now in my journey is more so towards understanding that it's actually not the food that we're putting into our body that is powering us. It's more of the life force and the prana that is powering us. And that's more so what breatharians tend to think. And you see breatharians who are able to survive on very little food, very little water, and keep their muscle mass on their body. And they use like qigong and breath work to bring in prana. So that's what I'm moving towards in that direction. And I'm excited to see how my protein needs will change, if at all, as I move more towards that direction, because I won't allow myself to get like super like malnourished looking. This is already pretty light for me in the mid 170s, and I was usually going like around like 195, 200. So I've
Wow.
already adjusted my set weight down like 20 pounds throughout this journey, but I feel so much better. But when I was in the 160s, which was unheard of, I probably wasn't 160 since I was like before puberty. Like, I'm a very naturally big person, you know what I mean? So that was too light for me. So I'm not ready to trade off completely having, physical muscle and physical size on my body for like the sake of breatharianism, or taking my fasting journey super deep, because I think that starts to do damage on your body, on your organs, and it takes a long time to build up, and I'm not sure that you ever really fully recover from something like that. And especially since I'm 39, I'm coming into my 40s, I want to keep as much muscle mass on my body, because I think that is a marker of health, and it helps with your youthfulness and longevity moving later into life. So right now I'm low protein. I'm like kind of like 80-10-10, but we'll see how that evolves moving forward. I can just tell you that when I started putting the sprouts in my diet, that helped a lot. And so if there's the protein myth, it is a myth, but we still do need amino acids. And if the more that you work out, the more that your body is going to want to have some substance. So I strongly recommend sprouting. Unless, you go into like grains and legumes. Some people do sprouted grains, sprouted legumes, or even some of the high raw vegans. If I would recommend lentils are probably the best source if you're going to do like a cooked form of protein.
Yeah.
That's a slippery slope too. Just keep it as raw as possible.
Yeah. For sure. Yeah. So I highly agree with you because you see, I see a lot of like raw vegans and fruitarians. They say like, "Oh, we don't really need like this much and this much." But I see, like, for an example, Ted Carr. Do you know Ted Carr? Yeah. So he says like, "I only eat fruit," but then he takes creatine. So I'm kind of like, so you do need like a little bit of something in order to build. You know, Obviously you need calories and you need the sugar and like to have it as your glycogen storage, but you also need something else to build it to give you like more strength. Obviously, this is why he's taking powders, or I don't know if it's liquid or whatever. So yeah, I'm kind of, because I've heard a lot of people saying that, but when I work out a lot, like my body really needs way more amino acids than what it would need if I don't work out, for an example. So, because I do track it just to see what my body like requires that day. Because some days I just won't fall asleep until I eat enough of something. And it makes a whole lot of sense when you talk about the sprouts, because you did mention that you put like lentil sprouts and mostly like the high protein sprouts, right?
Yep.
High amino acid. All right.
Exactly.
All right. And yeah, so now you're now that you're not putting so much effort into like working out just to maintain a certain, I don't know, a certain physique or certain um like strength, because you did say now that you do maintain like the same strength that you had before with little less effort right now, right? So yeah, I wanted to ask you if the movement that moving less and getting the same results actually can break a lot of myths to also to other people, as in terms of maintaining your, let's say, goals as in fitness. Because I used to work out so much, it was crazy. Like it was too much for sure. Yeah, so how how do you feel about it now, like with the movement and like just needing to move less in order to get like the same results and benefits when it comes to your fitness and also to your physique?
I just want to say, Yasi, that you ask like the best questions. You're like a really good interviewer, and that is an awesome question. And I'm gonna give you like kind of like a roundabout answer, but I will come back to directly answering that question.
uh,
Okay. So during that 20 years after I lost 100 pounds, I went from 300 to 200. I was doing the intermittent fasting, and one of the diet that I followed was a whole foods diet, basically. But the diet that I learned when I was a teenager and I was losing the weight was called the alkaline diet. And the alkaline diet is that you want to eat foods that keep your body's pH more alkaline, because the more acidic your body is, the harder it is to not only lose weight, but you become more sick.
mhm,
And these studies where all the people that had these terrible illnesses and died, they had acidic pHs, whereas healthy people have alkaline pHs. And so your alkaline foods are, guess what? Raw vegan foods, fruits, vegetables, to a lesser degree, nuts and seeds. As soon as you start cooking something, as soon as you start eating animal products, they become more acid forming into your body. All
mm,
right. So when you're working out a lot and you get muscle soreness, what do they tell you that's a product of? Yes, yes, you get an A on today's report card. That's lactic acid. Yes, when you start working out, it creates lactic acid in your muscle. How does that lactic acid get out of your muscle? Your body just has to filter it out through the lymphatic system, through the kidneys, and then you pee it out. So the more that you're working out, it's a double-edged sword. Yeah, it's good that you're moving your body, it's good that you're working out, but the more that you work out, the more lactic acid that you're creating. Now, we do have a threshold that gets greater when we're more fit of how much lactic acid we can tolerate and still perform at a higher level. But that doesn't mean that our body still has to process that out. Now, if you think about the lymphatic system and compare it to the blood system, which are the two fluid systems of our body, you would think that oh my God, we have so much blood and the lymphatic system is just a little bit. It's actually the opposite. Of our fluid in our body, the blood is 20% volume and the lymphatic fluid is 80% volume. So the more acidic that we become, the more that the lymphatic fluid starts turning into sludge, getting toxic, and it makes our kidneys work even harder to filter that out. And what controls our kidneys is our adrenal glands, which sit on top of the kidneys. The adrenal glands are like the brains of the kidneys, and they also produce the hormones that we use when we're working out, like adrenaline. So we're like taxing our body from all angles if we're working out. It leads to adrenal fatigue, it leads to toxicity and acidity in the body. And then, just like those sick people in the studies when I was studying the alkaline diet, it makes us more prone to illness. When
Well,
you're young and when you're working out a lot, there's a certain health and vitality and vigor that comes with that and a certain resilience. It's not like I was getting sick a lot, but it doesn't mean that my body wasn't building up more and more and more toxins and acidity inside my body as I was doing all that exercise. And so after I left that lifestyle and started to be a little bit more sedentary when I was working my job, and I would still work out, you know, I started to realize, after my metabolism kind of adjusted, that I'm like able to hit the same lifts. I'm able to do the same pace on the treadmill, and I'm not working out a crazy amount, and I feel better, and I'm sleeping better. And so that was like a big clue to me that, maybe less is more. And then when I started to clean up my body with fasting and with the raw foods and fruits, that helped me to get leaner. And then I was able to see that, oh my God, my muscles look exactly like they did when I was in my early 30s and I'm almost 40. Like this is pretty crazy with a fraction of the effort that I was doing. Now I did want to say this piece is that when I was in the 195 range of body weight and just eating a lot of chicken and eating a lot of those foods, I was noticeably bigger, more muscles, and I had a little bit more raw power. My bench max or my squat max or my deadlift, I had a little bit more raw power than I do right now just because of my body weight, but also when you're eating animal protein, you're not just eating macronutrients of protein. You're
yeah,
eating the flesh of an animal. And when you eat the flesh of an animal, you're eating their hormones and you're
yeah,
eating these substances inside the meat that stimulate your body. Just
yeah,
like caffeine. If you've ever taken a pre-workout and you're like, yeah, let's go. I'm going to go run a marathon. I'm going to go, it's just the stimulants in the pre-workout that are making you feel so amped up and ready to work. So, the stimulants that are in the meat, they stimulate your body to put on muscle and